Hello, all of you Japanime Games fans. Welcome back. I'm Ryan. I'm the marketing director here at Japanime. I've got another exciting interview. This one's a twofer. We've got the designers of not only just our upcoming Black Clover game, but they also designed another game for us, Japanime Tactics. This is Josh and Dylan from Lynnvander Studios. Hello, you guys. Love for you to just quickly introduce yourselves and maybe talk about how you got into this design, and I'd really like to hear how you guys ended up designing so much together as well.
Okay, yeah, that's going to be an interesting deep dive. Do you want me to introduce the company, Dylan, and then you can talk about how we met?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so yeah, we're Lynnvander Studios. Half of it, I mean, it depends on the day, but somewhere around half of Lynnvander Studios. We are a design for hire board game studio that's worked on a ton of licensed property stuff across the whole board game industry. Yeah, see shelving. But also we have published a number of our own designs as well. And so we've done a few different projects for Japanime Games now. Black Clover, I think, will be our third. There's one more in the hopper that isn't out yet that we also did. It's been done in our minds for a while, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later on in the interview.
So I was just sorry, I got distracted because I was counting, and I'm like, is it our third?
I don't even know anymore. I can't keep track.
Here's the thing: when you do, if you're not aware, the game design process is long from when you first start working on something and like envisioning it to when you hold a finished product in your hands, and so it's very easy to have them start to blend together after a while. Like I actually will admit that I completely forgot we did Black Clover until I actually saw the box being promoted on Facebook, and I went, "Oh right, we did that game."
Don't
It's
call
better
it forgettable to our audience. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, it's better than Tommy's reaction, which was, I don't remember even signing this project.
Tommy's would you call him the head of Lynnvander Studios?
Yeah, he's the face.
I call him the face.
Yeah. Business developer, CEO, and general director. I am basically development and logistics and mostly graphic design at this point. And Dylan, why don't you tell us about what you do at Lynnvander Studios?
The shorthand that I use is I'm the words and numbers guy, which basically means that I do a lot of the math that goes into our games and the initial design work in terms of trying to make sure that all of the pieces fit together well. But I'm also a technical writer for my day job. And so I write all of our rule books as well, because I find that background is super helpful for being able to explain concepts in ways that people could understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other part of that question is, what brought you guys together for, I guess, both Black Clover and for Grand Blue Fantasy? How did that collaboration between you guys come about?
Well, are you asking how the collaboration on those projects came about, or how we started working together in the first place? Because those are two different stories.
I guess both.
So
we'll do the origin story first, then we'll get into the specific project.
So for the origin story, the very first board game that I ever sold was the Shadowrun board game Sprawl Ops, and I sold it to Catalyst. And development work always happens even after you sell a design. And one of the things that Catalyst did was that they contracted Lynnvander Studios, which I had never interacted with. Like I had interacted with Tommy, but not the company as a whole before, and contracted them to take a look at it, clean it up a little bit because it definitely needed work, and also add a solo mode or co-op mode.
It was what, 2018? I think something.
I would have to
maybe 17, somewhere in that area.
I think that was like 17 or 18 for Sprawl Ops.
Yeah, it was a while ago. And so I was very nervous about the fact that this professional design studio was going to be looking at my first design and providing feedback about it. And I got a couple of pages of notes about things that they suggested changing. And for the most part, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is a great idea. This is a great idea. This is a great idea. And I went through and I was like, okay, let's go ahead. Let's do all the changes. This is awesome. Yep, that's totally valid. That makes sense. And then we got to a part where the math was suggested to change. And I wrote a 3-page response on why they were wrong. Because that didn't work with the probability. And I did all of the math and showed them everything about why that just didn't work. And then the response was like, okay, yeah, no, you can keep the math the way it is. And that was how I my introduction to Lynnvander.
Yeah, that was. I remember this because almost all of the things that and this is such a great foreshadowing of our entire working relationship, because I tried to criticize your math and you said, no, shut up. But everything that I suggested for user interface and layout, you were like, yeah, that makes total sense. Let's do it. That's every project we've worked on since then. It's just like 2 lanes and we'll talk to each other as we go.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this project. So this is Black Clover Star Festival. I got it right here. I see you got yours right behind you.
Yeah, I think this is you've got a production copy. I think I have
this is the real retail version right here.
I think this is an NPC behind me from when we proofed it at one of the previous shows. You handed me this copy.
So
it's mostly there.
I need to get my copy. I don't have one yet.
Oh, you'll have yours soon. So tell me about Black Clover, why you guys decided to do this game, how that kind of came about, and just what the design process for this was like a little bit.
So with Black Clover, so obviously we've worked with Japanime Games a lot and whatnot, and Japanime, we frequently have conversations about like potential licenses that would be fun to design a game for and things like that. Like that's semi-regular conversation that we have, and Black Clover was one of the IPs that came up. And I don't want to speak for Josh, so just speaking for me. I watched through like the entire first season of it, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. I think we could do some really cool stuff here. And then from there, it was like just getting really excited about the project, and then being like, okay, what kind of game do we want to do? How do we want to embody the IP in a board game way, but also make the board game unique, right? And so one of the things that we came up with was we were like, with Black Clover, it's really talking about like your squads. Your squad is really what matters. Like the school that you're part of and like all of that kind of information, that is one of the things that we wanted to make sure was really strong in the game itself. We didn't want it to be about like an individual person going out and like, 'cause sure, we could do a game about like the magic trials or something like that. And you're an individual going out and you're trying to perform well enough to get a good star rating. But we were like, no, where we feel that we could have a lot of fun is if you are in charge of your entire squad and you get to do all of these different things with all of these different spells and kind of connect them and combine them in ways that maybe even us as designers never even thought about. We thought that that would be a really cool idea.
Had you seen Black Clover before we started this project, or had you never heard of it when it was tabled?
I had never heard of it when we first started talking about it, but then
okay, that's what I thought.
Our things, I jumped in when it became something of, hey, maybe we want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's, I don't know, a dozen, maybe 15 licensed properties that I know pretty well, I follow. A lot of them are not anime. I enjoy anime, but I don't, and just end up watching a lot of it. And so when somebody tells me, hey, there's this really hot anime that we should make a board game about, I go, okay, I'll give it a shot. And Black Clover was, I mean, sometimes you'll get a project where you're like, yeah, okay, the license is kind of cool. I see what they're trying to do here. It's not for me, but we can still make a cool game. And we certainly have done. But for Black Clover, it was one of those ones where like, yeah, I watched the first half of the first season and it was like, no, I'm going to watch all of this now. Like, when is the next, what's out there? What can I watch? I really actually enjoyed it a lot. So I have become a Black Clover fan by working on this project. I had never heard of it before it came across our desk.
Oh, and now look, you're admitting to all the anime fans watching this that you don't really watch anime. And that's fine. But you've worked on several anime games for us.
Someone needs an outsider's perspective. I will say, however, we've worked on enough licensed properties that we have a bit of a reputation for being extremely thorough in our research, right? Primary sources, digging down not just what the show is about and how we can best communicate that as a game, but even down to what does the community, what do the fans of the show like about the property or the show? And what are things that like maybe the licensor would never even think of to include or think that they're going to need to do approvals on for this game? But if it's not in there, it's a tragedy to the community, right? Because a lot of the times licensors don't really understand their own IPs or their own communities that well either. So it's coming in as this third party and kind of actually getting to interrogate what the fandom likes about the thing and then figuring out how we can leverage that to make a cool thing people will like.
Hey, what a great question, because that was on my list. I've seen your research. I've seen the research that you did on Japanime Tactics, Grand Blue Fantasy, and the upcoming Sword Art Online. But speaking of like Black Clover specifically, what are those things? What are the things that you felt like with the community, with anime fans, that you had to have in this game, like come heck or high water, basically?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was also we knew from the beginning that we were going to be limited in how big this box was, how much we could put into it. Like Dylan totally hit on right away, like this setting is perfect to do every player is a squad, not an individual character. Because there's so many Magic Knights and they just keep adding more of them as the show goes. Like it is it a shonen? I guess it's sort of a shonen. It has some shonen vibes to it, but like the cast of characters in Black Clover is super, super robust. And there are going to be characters who are, community and player favorites that we made sure we could get in the game, along with some of their, iconic abilities. But there's just so many that I don't think we were even able to get all of them.
So one thing that I'll point out as a specific example that is really important if you think about like from a game design perspective. One of the golden rules about game design is that you want to trim the fat, if you will. You want to not have exceptions to rules. You want to not have special cases. You want to eliminate those as much as possible because you want people to focus on playing the game, right? Sometimes you have to do it, but in general, in game design, if you like create a rule and then you've got like 5 or 6 exceptions to it, that means that there's probably something inherently wrong with that rule and you should really look at re-examining it. But sometimes things are so important to the IP that we need to find a way to make space for it. And one of the perfect examples of this is Asa's anti-magic, right? Like,
well, he is the IP. He's the whole IP.
Like
everything is around
this entire system about using magic, but then we're talking about like an anti-magic person who we have to include because there's no way we can release this game and not do it. So it's going to create these exceptions and this weird way of working, but it has to be core to the gameplay experience because it is so core to the IP, right? Like we can't just smack it in and just have a special rule of like, oh, well, magic doesn't affect him, or like, oh, well, he doesn't need the magic cards to be able to use his powers. Like that's going to feel very tacked on. We need to make sure that the experience of playing him, because it is so integral to the IP, actually feels like it is part of the design and is not something that we've just smacked on.
Yeah.
So following up with that, since you guys have become Black Clover fans, since you have seen it, something I'm sure the audience is dying to know. Tell me your favorite characters. I got to know.
My problem is I'm horrible with names, so I have to look them up.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I'm personally sold on like, I think more of like the whole surfing on the surfboard on the sword got me like really tuned in.
Oh, like the season 3 era Asta when he starts using the sword as a surfboard.
Like that really, really, like I know Asta's the main, but that really, really appealed me to him because I was like, okay, that's just freaking cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole expansion to Black Clover Star Festival.
Like,
yeah, I feel an affinity for. Sorry, go ahead, Dylan.
I was gonna say, I also, and I apologize to you and your fans for not remembering the name, but I do like the Wizard King. Like, just the way that he handles things and like sets things up and like is so calm about everything and just like sets up the dominoes is something that I really appreciated.
Oh yeah. The story is incredibly well written. I mean, I feel like sometimes anime shows that I have seen in the past, the writing kind of falls down partway, or they kind of lose their way and it's becomes kind of uneven. I was surprised at how consistent Black Clover was across all of the seasons of the anime. In terms of characters for me, I really enjoy the moment when we kind of see Yami, the captain of the Black Bulls, really come into his own and actually, like, oh no, he actually knows some stuff, and he's been working this entire time for the betterment of all of these sort of downtrodden magic folk that nobody believes in, right? He's got this whole scheme of, no, I've been collecting all these weird misfits and turning them into something unparalleled just by sheer virtue of the fact that he was always a misfit himself. Like, his character arc, I think, is fantastic. I also have a soft spot for Yuno. I feel like he's relatable for me.
Yeah, those are good answers, but it was kind of meant to be a little bit of a trick question, or at least lead into this one, because I'm curious for you guys, people that work on so many IP games, and so many of them are also anime. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to step back and be like, wait a minute, which character is even in this one? Like, do you ever get them confused or struggle to remember, like, which game you're working on, what the world, like, which elements are in this?
So that's never yes and no.
You're gonna like my answer.
So yes and no, because, like, for example, as I already admitted, I'm horrible with names. Like, I'm not joking that I am so bad that, so I also write fiction. Even when I write my own short stories or novels, like, I have a recurring character that I have used in 3 novellas and 2 short stories, and right now I couldn't tell you her name. I have a file that I keep track of all of my characters' names because I can't even keep track of those. So, keeping track of names and, like, figuring out, like, who is who, that is a blind spot for me, and it actually has nothing to do with how many games I work on. The bigger thing for me is that where it's really not hard to keep track of is what is important to the game. And the reason that I say it that way is, like, for example, in Black Clover, the individual elements that people use and the spells that they have, that's what is really, really important to the gameplay with the way that we structured it. And that's something that I don't have any trouble keeping track of, about, like, oh, this person uses water, and, like, one of their favorite things to do is, like, create the water shield so that then they can actually protect the other people that are with them. And it's like, that will get ingrained in my head. But then if you ask me what her name is, total blank.
No, well. So I'm the opposite. The answer to your question, Ryan, is no. At this point, we've done, I think, 35 published games. I could probably tell you the stat lines on some of the cards we've published.
Wow.
Having gone down that rabbit hole. I might not remember the character names right off the top of my head, but they're all definitely in there, and I can picture the cards.
Wow.
It's just how sharp the text is or not.
You're pretty good at keeping it all separated. Like, when you're dialed into a project, like, that is no crossover for you.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, obviously, I have a fairly substantial set of spreadsheets that I make notes in as we go. Like, here are all the characters and their names, and I've definitely got every wiki, bookmarked, and I can cross-reference all of that.
Well, a good way to test this theory is if you have us work on multiple projects at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It helps that our projects are serial, but if you want us to work on multiple at the same time, then we can see if we get confused.
All right, Dylan actively signing multiple contracts here. I like it.
Right. We're making a deal. I am not qualified to make deals with Japanime. But to be honest, like, you guys have
just tell Eric it's fine. It's fine.
Eric is our boss at Japanime. He loves working with you guys. We love working with you guys. Obviously, you've done multiple games with us, and so that's another question I want to ask, because Black Clover it's a standalone game. I mean, who knows? Possibly, maybe, expansions maybe. But, like, you did Black Clover, which is a standalone game. The system and all the characters and everything about the game is all wrapped up in a little bow that is Black Clover, versus something like Japanime Tactics, where you had to design a system that worked not just for Grand Blue Fantasy, which is our first set, but for Sword Art Online, which is the second set we've announced, and the sets that you know of that I can't speak about quite yet. How different is that process when you have to build a system that could be applied to any IP versus like specifically something that was for Black Clover?
Can I answer this one and you can backfill for me here, Dylan?
Go ahead. I've been answering a lot.
Yeah, but also I think you'll give good context to this answer. So there are really two approaches that I think we've used in the past. One of the reasons that our licensed games tend to resonate well with folks is that we are a theme first company. Like, the game we design is bespoke to the property. We did not make a game engine and then graft the property on top, right? The game was made with the property in mind. That's true for Black Clover. Japanime Tactics is slightly different because we knew we were going to put all of these other properties into it later, so it had to be more of a generic system that we could bend and adapt and modify for each property.
Yeah, so how did you approach that for Japanime Tactics? And still making it feel like it's as thematic to the IP as, for example, Black Clover.
Well, before Josh answers that, there is something that I want to add to what he was saying about Japanime Tactics, which is like, yes, we deliberately designed a system that we knew would work for the IP. Now that that system exists, one of the things that we have engaged with conversations with Japanime about is what IPs would work with this system, right?
Yeah.
Like, so just because Japanime Tactics exists doesn't mean that it's going to be good for any anime IP. And so we do actually have conscious thoughts and decisions about what IPs will work well in the system and how we can tweak the system to support them.
Right. We could shoehorn in almost anything. I think we're capable enough designers to do it, but we won't.
Yeah.
There's got to find that balance, that resonation between this is what the game is good at, and we should marry it to a property that wants to do those things.
It is by heart a fighting game, a conflict-based game, so it might be hard to like Chobits, Japanime Tactics, Chobits might be
JRPG / fighting game, right?
Right.
The mobile app is very JRPG.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and we've had you on talking about just the inspiration for sort of, or for like the Japanime Tactics line being like, Final Fantasy Tactics and Fire Emblem, which you kind of approach that game. Were there similar inspirations when it's a game like Black Clover, or do you just try to kind of pull just from the anime when it comes to that?
So it's a little bit of both. The big thing is that a large number, most games can, when you like boil them down, can be boiled down to, oh, this is an X type of game, right? For example, if you look at Black Clover, it's got a lot of different elements in there, but you can look at it, you could say like, oh, it's a worker placement style game, like from a very high level. But the big thing that we try to do whenever and I'm sorry that my desk is shaking. I have an itching dog under my desk. The thing that we try to do is whenever we look at that game, we're like, okay, how can we make it different? How can we make it unique? What is it about the game that you look at this and you can say, oh, this is different from other worker placement games, or oh, this is different from other combat games? What about it is different and unique? What twist or spin can we put on it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, for example, without getting too deep into the weeds on it, in Black Clover, like, you've got your workers that you place out, which are your little flags, but then you assign strength to them later after you see how everybody has assigned their flags. That's something that's different from most worker placement games. Most worker placement games, you put out your worker, you do the task, you get the reward, right? And so it was like, well, we want to make this a little bit different, but we want to do it in a way that makes sense in the IP. So we took this change and we're like thinking about the IP, and it's like, well, if we're all sitting around a table as like heads of the squad and we're like, oh, I'll take care of this and I'll take care of that, what would fit in the IP of like where I'm going to try to get an edge and an advantage? And it's going to be like, oh, well, you don't know that I'm going to really send only one person here and send all my other people here, right? That's something that very much fits with the intrigue of the being around that planning table and trying to play others and holding true to your word, but still trying to manipulate the system to get the most stars. And so, and it also then, like I said, now makes it stand out from other worker placement style games.
We've also got the whole element of actions that you perform in the game are also driven by a light deck building mechanic.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, also a bunch of different sort of disparate influences that kind of came together in a new kind of configuration that neither of us had ever seen before. And I always trust that if Dylan hasn't seen it, then it's probably totally novel, because Dylan is a machine and plays all the board games.
Yeah, I play quite a bit. So
yeah,
you touched on something that you just said, and you just mentioned, and I would agree with you when you say that Black Clover has something that I haven't seen before. The way that these mechanics come together is new. Is that like a design principle for you guys at Lynnvander? Like, do you always try to do that? And how has that worked out, I guess?
I mean, as far as I can say, any game that I've been part of, we've done that with. Lynnvander existed before I joined the team, so.
Yeah, some of our earlier games are less ambitious in that regard. And I mean, I'm a firm believer of sort of make the thing that everyone in the team feels like it should be. And maybe you'll find commercial success and maybe you won't. But at the very least, you made a cool thing that, let's hope, is somebody's favorite game, right? Because there's nothing worse than, failing to make those jumps, those leaps, and creating something that's just mediocre in every regard. At least we've done something interesting and different. And if you love it, awesome. If you hate it, cool. Then we just know that's not a game for you, and there's lots more out there, right?
I mean, the other very, very blunt side of it is that, by and large, the vast majority, I don't want to say all, but I really feel like it's all of people you see in the game design and publishing market do it because they love games and they're excited about it. It's not something that you go into like, I'm going to be a doctor because I make lots of money. No one really says I'm going to be a game designer because they make lots of money. So it's like, you do this because it's fun and interesting and exciting. And like, for me personally, on a very personal level, it's the most fun and interesting and exciting when it's new and it's different and it's things that like I haven't seen before, right? It's not a clone of another game that exists. It's something where it's like, let's see how this works. And
well, anytime that you're able to, when we get to that midpoint in the project where it's like, oh man, we're so excited about this and now nothing is working, it's the worst. And that sort of pit of despair in the middle of the creative process, right? It's definitely a curve like this. And once you get into that pit, you just have to acknowledge that, like, no, you're in the pit because you're treading new ground. You're tilling new earth here. Like, you're doing something new that you don't have a plan for how to solve, and you'll have to figure it out. That's a great sign that you're making something original.
It feels like you both would really come to that challenge. Like you feels like you both designed for those. You don't take the easy way. Like you try to design around those.
I think generally not. And part of, I think a lot of designers are also, part of why board games take a long time to develop is because with very few exceptions, most games are not meant to just slap a new license or theme on an existing engine, right? I mean, obviously, once your game becomes super successful, people start to think like, oh, that was a really cool game. We should try a different property on it or a different version of it. And then you get in kind of that. But I feel like, unless you are printing your 100,000th copy of something, you're probably just like, no, you should be making something new and interesting and different and not just, because once you go above that level, it's very business related. It's less about the craft, I feel.
So with the exception, so obviously Japanime Tactics was designed from the beginning to be a system that incorporated a ton of IPs. So like forgetting about that for a second, do you generally do you design for an IP, or do you guys ever just design, you come up with a system and then look for maybe an anime or an IP that would fit that system, or is it always the IP first?
I'll do look and feel based on IP. Like I can look at an IP and go, this is probably what it should feel like to play this game. This is probably, sort of the presentation of it and what the components should be. But I'm very much packaging, design, user experience first person. I'll occasionally have mechanics ideas that are like, I thought about this mechanic 5 years ago and we never found a good thing to do with it, but it might solve this problem. And so there's always this repository. That's kind of how you design, right, Dylan? You're like a little bit more mechanics repertoire.
I have a notebook of mechanics that have not made it into games yet that I'm excited to eventually pull into games.
Yeah, I asked Dylan to pitch a concept for a game. He was like, "Well, I got these mechanics." And we were like, "Yes, Dylan, but what about the theme? What is the game about?" He goes, "I don't know. I don't really care."
Well, that is, I mean, there are definitely people that design. I think it's a little different when you guys are designing like in the IP space. I know some designers will send in designs that are just like, here's a bunch of boxes. You let the publisher decide what those boxes are.
Yeah.
It could be birds, it could be fish, it could be the rainforest, whatever. But with you guys, like, it's generally, what IP you're developing for.
Well, even if you're not in an IP, like, I think I know that designers do work the way that you've described, and I know that I've worked that way, and sometimes I do still work that way. But I would never pitch a publisher in that way. And the reason why is that I have learned a lot over the years, and Josh has helped me a lot, so thank you. That theme and setting strongly impact your mechanics. Strongly. Like, you don't want to, well, okay, you could probably do it tongue in cheek, but what I was thinking was like, you don't want to have like your little chibis go out and it to be like, violently death, like arena match game. But then I was thinking, okay, no, wait, that would probably.
I think it's been done several times, actually. That game exists.
But point being is that, like, the UI interface and the theme and the setting are all very closely tied together, and they all strongly impact the mechanics, and they should feed off of each other. And I think that you're doing a disservice if you're like, well, this stuff just goes together, we can smack whatever we want on it, even if you're not talking IP. I think that disservice is especially egregious if you are talking IP, because if you are talking IP, there are some things that are core, that are expected, that fans want to see, that you need to make sure are included and don't feel slapped on, like we talked about that earlier.
Right, in a satisfying way.
Oh, with that being said, I am curious with Black Clover, to talk about the design of it. What were the struggles that you guys ran into with Black Clover, like mechanically or thematically, or making those things merge together in a satisfying way?
How long ago did we do most of the design in this game? 3 years? Something like that?
I was going to say 2 or 3 years, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. I think a lot of that got pushed out of my brain for the 20 projects I've done post that. Let me think about that one for a minute. You got anything to mind, Dylan?
That's a good thing to note too. Sorry, Dylan. That just like people might not understand that, like, usually designers do, like, your process is done like it takes years for the artwork and the production and proofing and all that. So that's something I guess good for the audience to recognize. So sorry, Dylan.
Oh yeah, no, that absolutely is true, and that, like, is the whole thing start to blend together after a while. The other side of this is that, as happens with a lot of our projects, usually, while we will talk about it in a group and we will discuss things at a high level, usually the first pass of the design is done by either Josh or I, and then we bring it back to each other and, like, brainstorm. And Black Clover, the original part of it, part of the reason some stuff might not be coming to mind for you, Josh, is because I did the original design for this game.
That's part of it, but I also think it was relatively smooth. I remember the pieces fitting together in this case pretty well. I was actually, out of curiosity,
he says it was relatively smooth.
From my perspective, it was. I mean, I'm actually digging back through our files repository to pull up the Black Clover Star Festival playtest notes document to see what we had.
A little different, Dylan, from that.
I mean, even before we got to the point where we could play test and we were even getting just the first draft, there were definitely some things and some challenges, like, that came up. Like, a big part of it, as we said, was we knew that we wanted it to be squads. We made that decision pretty early on rather than it being individuals. But one of the big things that we ran into, or that I ran into, was trying to find a combination of the fact that, well, you always want, like, if you think about the IP, people are able to just use their magic. And it's like, well, we can't just have you able to do anything you want at any time. And so we need to come up with a way that works where using the magic is not a guarantee, because otherwise the game's going to be way too predictable and not fun. And that was where the card mechanic came in that we have, where we use the cards as mana to kind of power your spells. And that was something that took a while to get, and actually was something that we had to talk to the licensor about, because they weren't sold on first, and we had to explain why it worked really well with the mechanics and still fit with the IP. Because they're like, well, why can't this person just go out and do the spells that they know? That's how it should work. That's how it. And we're like, well, we need to have this bit of randomness and this bit of unpredictability to make the game solid. And that's a very concrete example of something that we very specifically struggled with, pretty early on, to try to make sure that the game flowed well, but still felt like the IP.
So I've got a specific one. Browsing the playtest notes doc actually did jog my memory. And this is a really basic one that you'll often have problems with in any sort of worker placement game. In the very beginning, I think we actually had individual magic knights as workers. You were sending them to do specific things. And in Black Clover, so much of the anime focuses on the Black Bulls and that whole roster of characters who are, by the end of the first season, like, there's 8 of them, 10 of them. And they're all fairly well-developed characters. But then you look at somebody else like Golden Dawn, and you really only have like 4, maybe 5. And then you look at like the Blue Rose Knights, and there's 2 characters and someone who shows up in like a backshot, sort of like background still of 1 frame in the first season. And you're like, well, crap, we need 3 characters on this team or it doesn't work. The game breaks. So like, how can we balance the fact that we've got this worker placement game where we have vastly different scales and sizes of resources for all the different wizard houses, guilds? What do they call, like, squads, I guess?
Yeah.
The other thing that we ran into with that problem was, like, because one of the solutions that we explored early on was like, well, how about we have in the beginning there be like this draft, and it's like the Arena Academy where like the squad captains pick their draft, and like, just because somebody winds up in the Black Bulls in the show doesn't mean it necessarily happens in the game, and just because somebody winds up in the Crimson Dawn doesn't mean they can't be on the Black Bull. Like, let's do that. Because in one of the things that we knew that we wanted from a gameplay perspective was we wanted your ability to build your squad. Because that's important for the growth curve of the game. And
having the diversity, right? Whether you specialize in one element or several elements, or go like totally wide and do all of them.
Exactly. And so that was something that we wanted to do, but we realized that doing that with named characters didn't work because it felt way too much like it broke away from the IP, because it didn't make sense and it just didn't feel right. And so that was where we shifted and wound up including I don't remember what we called them in the final game, but internally we called them generic Magic Knights. And they're just generic Magic Knights that have some spells and have an element affiliation. And that's what you're drafting. That way you're not drafting the named characters, and the named characters are still tied to the squads that you would expect them to be. And once we
I remember that being a licensor conversation as well. It was wait, you can make a Franken squad out of these 4 people? And they were like, no, that doesn't, we don't like that at all.
Yeah, like it didn't
cool
work.
variants. You could play that variant at home with the final game. It would totally work. There's nothing mechanically stopping you from doing it.
That printed on the card.
They're printed on a card, sure, but that's it, right? You could hand wave that.
I want to get to something that I feel like is kind of important. This is something that we hear about all the time. We get questions from the fans. Hopefully some of these people watching this are some of the people that are asking these questions. I don't think the audience understands quite exactly how limited we are. We work on IPs and just some of the restrictions. So I'd love to get your guys' perspective on that, because the one thing that we hear every single day about Japanime Tactics, at least, is aren't the standees double-sided? And it's stuff like that where we just want to be like, yes, we know, but we are under this, like, basically a checklist of things that we can and cannot do.
Yeah.
The licensor gets us. So
well,
to just get your perspective on
there's the Japanime Tactics standee thing is an interesting one, and this is by no means a situation limited to Grand Blue Fantasy. This is pretty much every Japanese licensor I have ever worked with on any board game related project. Nobody ever wants you to flip their art. The art, the original primary source that has been put to television, or the artist has made a poster, whatever, that is a holy object. You must not crop it overly. You must not rotate it. You must not flip it. You must not scale it too much. Mess with that as little as possible. That will be allowed. Anything deviating from that course, almost certainly going to be flip this art back. Can't do it. And so when you have a standee that is shape cut with a pose, one side of that standee is going to have the art to the correct pose and shape cut. The back, the only viable option would be to print the character art going the other way. And the licensor goes, well, now they're left-handed. And you're like, well, but it's fine though. And they're like, no, it's not fine. This character would never do this. They would never look like this. You flip their costume. That's not okay.
That's part of them.
So the alternative,
their property, right? So
yeah, they're definitely protecting their brand. And I would probably be upset if I created something as well and then saw my characters being portrayed in the wrong way. The other possibility that you could go down the route to do would be like, hey, licensor, we feel really strongly that the backs of all these standees need full character art in the same detail and quality as your existing art, so that when you turn them around, you see the back of the character. Yes, but then no one would make any money on the game, and it would take 3 years longer to make. No word of a lie, they would have to do their own. They would probably have to require you to hire the same artist for consistency, because again, they care about their brand. They would want to then oversee the whole process and do approvals and changes on that art, which would then add an extension to your development timeline, not to mention added cost for actual art. So there's the choice of, like, you could make the game, or you could just not make the game at all. And in this case, we chose to make the game.
I mean, and the other side of that I don't think that people who aren't in the industry fully realize is that any change, no matter how small, needs to be approved. Every single thing that you change needs to be approved. You make something a little bit darker, it needs to go through the approval process, and it needs to come back. And this process, it's not as simple as like you send an email and you get a response the next day saying, yeah, that's fine, or please change this thing. You're talking about having weeks, sometimes months in between when you get responses. So you tend to try to batch all of the changes that you are doing, because you know it's going to take a month or two to get a response. You send them all over, a month or two, you get a response back. You make those changes. You then need to send, even if you do it exactly as they say, you need to now send them back for approval, wait another couple of months for them to say, yes, it's okay, and hope that they don't find something else.
Yeah.
And this is if you are using resources that they have provided. If you are creating new resources, it's a whole much bigger process, and they're going to want a lot more changes, and they're going to be a lot more strict about it because it's a new asset as opposed to using their current asset. And this is not strictly something that is in anime. It's something that we've run into with the Evil Dead game that we made, right? Because that's a licensed IP. Anything that looks like, one of the actors needs to be approved, you need to get the permission and the rights for them, because they have the ability to be like, I don't like how that that picture of me. I don't like how it looks. You can't include that, right? And so you have to go through this whole thing. And that's one of the downsides to working with IP. If you are creating your own game without IP, as long as you are like resourcing the art and whatnot, and you're in charge of it. You work with the artist and you're like, hey, I don't like the way that dragon looked. Please, can you change it? And the artist gives you new art. You're like, cool, we're done. Okay, awesome. And bam, goes out the door. Because you're in charge of the whole thing. But when it's IP related, there's this whole extra layer that adds so much time and so much effort and so much cost.
You say layer, I say it's layers. From our perspective, and Japanime Games have been fantastic to work with in this regard, but there's always like the designer, then the publisher, then the licensing coordinator. And for many Japanese properties, this is a North American firm that speaks English that then talks to Japan. And then on Japan's end, there's usually a licensing liaison person at the company that created the IP. In this case, who is it for Black Clover? I can't remember. It's one of the anime production companies.
I don't actually know. I have the box right here, but I don't.
It should be on the back cover.
Let me check my box. Oh, wait.
Yeah, TV Tokyo.
TV Tokyo for this one.
So, like, they're going to have a licensing coordinator within their company, and then they're going to have to talk to their boss who actually makes some decisions about how the brand is represented, and how many other people might get pulled in there. So, like, you can imagine that if it takes a day for each of those steps, it's going to be at least a week, assuming everyone is instantaneous in their response time. And so, like, Dylan said we batch these. It's not uncommon for working with properties, especially with overseas licensors, to spreadsheet out all of your change log. Here's the card. Here's what we changed. Here's why we changed it. Times 400 rows, because it's, every card, depending on how big the game is and how many changes you made. That can be a very extensive process to keep track of, and they want that detail because then it makes it a little bit easier for them to actually keep track of the project when you might be one of 20 different licensees they're working with, right? They might be approving merchandise over here and a board game over here and commercials or, online ads over here. Like it. Yeah. So they're usually.
That's why it takes 2 years for a game like this to come out. And I think we've had this with we have a game called Fruits Basket based on that anime coming out. And it's like, when they do submit changes, even if it's something as simple as, we need to change the size of the box, or we need to change the composition of the artwork on the cover, all that has to come back. So it can take 2 years to just finalize everything before it comes out. And then you have that production, the sample right there behind you. And I remember when you looked at that, you're like, well, here's some things that need to be changed. And again, it's not as simple as just us fixing those mistakes. Then we have to resubmit the entire thing again. And it is a process. So I guess fans out there need to know that we definitely do this out of love, right? Like this is working in IP might be one of the hardest things to work in when it comes to game design, right?
Yeah,
100%.
I have heard it said elsewhere, perhaps infamously, that like board games take quite a lot of effort to design, create, and the lead time for making your own game, even if you have no external stakeholders, it's still going to involve all the development, all the testing, all the art, then the manufacturing, then the freight, then the distribution, right? Like that whole process, the freight and distribution alone, easily 6 months. Okay, but like a licensed property, it's not uncommon for it to take 4 times as long. I have heard other publishers say we could make 4 of our own original games in the same time we could make 1 licensed project.
That's true. Like, we love it. We love anime. We love working in this industry. So, we do it for you guys. And then before we go, I do want to know from both of you, since not only do you work in a lot of IPs, you also, like we talked about, designed our Japanime tactics system. So I'd like to know from both of you, first of all, dream IP project to design a game for, and secondly, dream IP to bring into Japanime Tactics. This is not official. I just want to know what you guys think.
Okay.
Because
for the first one, does it have to be an anime property or sky's the limit?
Sky's the limit for your dream IP to make a board game based on.
I mean, I have answers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was waiting for Josh.
No, go ahead. You go first.
So, my dream IP to make a game for, honestly, is Pacific Rim.
Oh wow, okay.
I I love big stompy mechs, and Pacific Rim just, it really hit a lot of high spots for me. It is a frequent rewatch movie in this household, primarily by me, but also by my partner. But we really, really like the movie, the first one and the second one. Think it's great. So yeah, Pacific Rim for me would be a dream IP to work on.
That'd be
Yeah.
that'd be great Japanime Tactics too. I would love to see Pacific Rim an anime, because they did like an anime for Pacific Rim, right? Like
They did. It was on Netflix.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Netflix did it.
Yes.
Like, but yeah, and it was good. Not as good as the movies in my opinion, but I did enjoy watching it. But yeah, like that's probably one of my big ones.
What about Japanime Tactics? Do you have a pick for that you'd love to design, or characters you'd love to bring into the Japanime Tactics world?
So for Japanime Tactics, for reasons, one of my favorites that, so there's two that I would be torn between, but one is like, well, yeah, duh, which is Final Fantasy Tactics, because I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. Like,
Yeah.
that's the easy answer, right? Because
I want Agrias and Gefgarion. And
I want to create the job system in Final Fantasy. That's what I want to do. I want to create the job system, and then like have you run to town with it and like build your decks based upon the jobs that you pick. I think that could be awesome. The one that is not, and as you'll see, both of mine with these are tied to mechanics. The other one is I'd really like to do Disgaea, because I think doing the pyramids and the colored tiles, if you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played the game, you're probably like, what the hell is he talking about? But it is a very cool element of the game that I would love to integrate into tactics.
Yeah. What about you, Josh?
I think they might be one in the same IP in this case. Tactics is definitely up there for me. I know people have talked Fire Emblem in the past. That's not a game that I actually know very well. I didn't grow up playing Fire Emblem. I was very much a Final Fantasy player. For me, it's actually Star Fox.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
it's board game.
Yeah, or card game, whatever it is. I want to do something with the Star Fox universe. It was I think one of my earliest
rings, you have to throw it.
Yeah, right. See? Fold up paper airplanes. Yeah, we got it.
Like Fox,
we designed a board game live.
Characters for Japanime Tactics.
Yeah, right. There's a fairly decent sized cast. You could probably get 8 characters for Tactics out of them. Not to mention, bring in all the Star Wolf guys.
That's what I love about Tactics. That ability to,
if you've ever played Star Fox Assault on the GameCube, I think that is probably the pinnacle of Star Fox games in my opinion, because it's a 3D. So I played Star Fox 64 to death. I have somewhere in the realm of the top score ever in Nintendo Power. I can't remember if I beat it or not, but somewhere in that vein. Like I had that game memorized. I knew every single level, every lane. I could play it on hard and not get hit. Like I could do the whole hard path to the conclusion and not be shot. But Assault, I think, is actually the better gameplay experience because the cast of characters is better, and it's got that whole Battlefront vibe over on foot, and then we're in vehicles and we can sort of hot swap and do shenanigans. Like it's possible while you're flying your R-Wing in Assault to get out of the cockpit, stand on the wing of it with a missile launcher and shoot someone down instead of doing your stuff with your R-Wing. So it just, I have a lot of really fond memories of playing that game multiplayer, even though I played 64, probably more in total.
What we're saying is we need to see some like ship-to-ship combat in Japanime Tactics. You got your ground forces, you got your ships.
I think we have a couple of those games already, but yes, anything else we can make in acrylic stands, we can do. We might have made that game a couple of times.
Oh, that's true. You've done a few.
I've got Star Trek Alliance behind the chair here too. You can't see it on camera. Do you like my ships?
Yeah, it's Snap Ships too. That was you as well, right?
Yeah. That was Lynnvander.
I've been binging Devil May Cry, the Devil May Cry anime on Netflix right now. And every time I watch that, all I can think about when I watched it, I was like, man, those would make sweet Japanime Tactics characters. Like, I'm really excited for the future of like, we've already talked about Sword Art Online coming, and I know see people online are already speculating like, like the combinations of characters that you'll be able to use, the way you're going to be able to mix all those characters together. Yeah, I can see as this opens up, as we kind of continue to do this, like you're going to be making some very sweet teams. So I want to say thank you guys for being here. Before we go, really quick, where can people find you, and what is one exciting thing you guys have coming out? Maybe not even necessarily Black Clover related, but just in general. Like, what are you really excited about?
Well, you can find us on Lynnvander.rocks is our company website. And we actually have a sibling sort of company that is also under the Tommy Gofton brainchild, which is Six Sides of Gaming. That's our YouTube channel. We do a lot of D&D actual play. We do a ton of, we play Battletech on there, play Shadowrun on there. We've done some Japanime Games related stuff on there, and probably more of that in the future. But that's the lowdown on Lynnvander. Dylan, what's coming up that you're super excited to see in the cardboard?
Black Clover.
No, other than that, pop out answer.
I haven't gotten my copy yet, and I did the core design for it. I'm incredibly excited for it.
Okay.
Anything else?
It gave you an opportunity to plug literally anything else we're working on. Okay, that's fine.
Plug it for him, Josh.
Yeah, it's all good.
Evil Dead 2.
Evil Dead 2 is pretty exciting. Most of my time for the last year and a half has been consumed by this Battletech Aces box set for Battletech Alpha Strike back there. This has been a massive project for the whole team. That is just a fully... It takes what is a traditional miniatures war game and makes it a cooperative light RPG.
Awesome. I know you've been really excited about that one.
Oh yeah, that's my wheelhouse.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much for designing for Japanime. Really excited for Black Clover. Really excited for what the future with these collaborations between Japanime and Lynnvander brings for us. And that probably means that we'll have you guys back on. I know we've got our Sword Art Online Kickstarter launching, so that is not the last you'll hear from these two guys. But again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys all so much for watching. Have a great day.